We're talking today about the impact of digital technology on the environment and specifically the carbon footprint. Daphne Laprance-Ronguet here to talk a little bit further about this. Daphne, hard to measure here, but how bad is it?
So it's very hard to actually put an exact number on how responsible digital technologies are for carbon emissions these days. There are a lot of studies on the topic, but the report doesn't go as far as to put a specific number. They give an estimate. Digital technologies represent between 1.4% and 5.9% of global emissions, global greenhouse gas emissions. And this number is only likely to increase, of course, just to give you an idea. Global internet users will surpass 5 billion by 2023, and all this extra digital connectivity comes with more carbon footprint and more emissions. The report highlights a few interesting ways that on an individual level you could contribute to reduce those emissions. So for example, purchasing a new device like a laptop or a phone or a tablet or a smart TV every 4 years instead of the average two could cut the emissions linked to the production of the object or the device by a half, simply because the emissions tied to making the device are so important. So purchasing devices secondhand is also a good way of making sure that you reduce your carbon footprint. Recycling is obviously very important to make sure that materials can be reused. The report stresses that leaving an old device in a drawer and forgetting it in your house amounts to a form of landfill, really. Another interesting point that's made in the report is to do with what's called responsible streaming. So it's not something that most of us think about, but when you stream in HD on your phone, you're actually increasing your carbon footprint. So the report estimates that between that if you're streaming for an hour on your smartphone in high definition, you're using about 8 times more power than if you were streaming in standard definition. And on a smartphone screen, you can't really see the difference between the two versions. So that's a way, again, that you could stream responsibly and reduce your carbon footprint. Um, Similarly, when you're watching a YouTube video, this is not something that you can do at the moment, but that would be an idea to put to platforms like YouTube. If there was a way to stop the video and only listen when you're just listening to content on YouTube, this could lead to reducing YouTube's global emissions by between 1% and 5%. So again, all these little tips and tricks that could lead to eventually reduce the carbon footprint of digital technologies that are set to only grow exponentially in the next few years.
All right. And Daphne, on the flip side of this, it's actually technology that holds the keys, to the solutions that will help to reduce emissions.
Yeah, of course, the businesses on top of the consumers have a role to play as well. Actually, in the UK, which has targeted 50% emissions reductions by 2030, it's estimated that existing digital technologies could contribute a third to reducing those emissions. So that's a huge amount of potential for these digital technologies. Something about things like artificial intelligence, for example, that leads to making everything smarter and optimizing all those processes so that they can use less energy. So for example, in agriculture, that's something that's been well reported and well evidenced that AI has a role to play in enabling crops to have better yields while using less water and less energy. Similarly, in making cities smarter, AI could lead to less traffic congestion, therefore less carbon emissions. Digital twinning technologies would make most buildings very efficient, and in this way optimize power consumption to reduce again those carbon emissions. AI is not the only thing, of course. We've all seen the multiplication of platforms in the past years that all have sort of eco-friendliness and environmental values at heart. So mobility as a service again can help reduce traffic congestion. We've seen platforms that allow you to trade secondhand items. That's also pretty important, pretty helpful. And even things like smart meters can help reduce carbon emissions. Looking towards the future, the further future, if that makes sense, there's also a good promising results that can be achieved with technologies like supercomputing or quantum computing, which again will bring more solutions to solve this efficiency equation in order to again reduce the carbon emissions and the carbon footprint of digital technologies.
All right, and Daphne, when we talk about the big, the giant tech companies here, how much progress are they making, or what type of promises are they making about helping things in the future?
We're seeing a lot of pledges. Obviously, there's barely a week that goes by really without one tech giant or the other having either pledged to a new commitment or developed a technology to be greener and to make their processes greener. Google, Amazon, Apple, they've all pledged to go greener and to make their technologies greener. The most ambitious is probably Microsoft, that has pledged to remove its carbon footprint entirely, not just on an annual basis, but also to remove all of its carbon emissions from the atmosphere since it was created in 1975. One interesting aspect of this commitment to go greener is the efforts that have been made in the data center space. So data centers are often pointed out as using a lot of energy and being quite power hungry. They contribute just under 1% of global carbon emissions, and they're often seen as the ugly duckling of big tech's carbon footprint. In reality, there has been major efforts and a lot of research in the space to make data centers more sustainable. And there has been a lot of results in that space. So, for example, over the last 10 years, data centers have been processing 550% more computation, but their energy footprint, energy demand has only gone up by 6%. So that's only an example of something that big tech can do to significantly change its carbon footprint. It's only one example, and a lot more needs to be done. And perhaps even more importantly, more needs to be done to hold these platforms accountable to their commitments, to make sure that they go through with their commitment to being greener. So yeah, hopefully only better things to come from big tech in the future in order to reduce the carbon footprint of digital technologies.
Daphne, thanks so much for being with us here today. And of course, for Daphne's full article and what you need to know, make sure you check that out on ZDNet. Thanks for watching.